Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Elders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
Blessings to everyone. This is Tello, and I'd like to welcome you again to the Healing Generations podcast, in which we explore the many dimensions of generational healing and all the medicine of our ancestors that we've been taught over the years that can really support us, ground us, and help us to develop, to grow, to learn, and to heal. And at the same time, looking at the generational trauma that lives with us today in many, many forms. We've been inviting guests to come and share from their wisdom, from their teachings, from their experience, and have gained so much from listening to others. And throughout those podcasts, we've received questions and some inquiries about various issues and various topics. And one of those things is, how is it that what are the most important things that are important in grounding people today? And what are those teachings that can really help us? And so today I decided to share from some of those questions, some of the teachings that we've learned along the way. And so I want to begin just by thanking the Creator, thanking the ancestors, and thanking all those that have come before us, that have provided these teachings, provided these wisdoms, provided the sacrifice, and provided the path for us to journey, to grow, to learn, and to flourish. And I'd like to thank all of you and all of your ancestors. And if we could take a moment and just begin by just taking a deep breath all together. And just release and let go. And as you take that deep breath, I want you to call in your ancestors, call in all of those that have come before you, to acknowledge them, but also to bring them along the journey with you. Because as we've talked about in many of these sessions, many of the traumas that our ancestors and our relatives have experienced for years went unresolved because they were just trying to survive. They were just trying to get by. And in trying to survive with the barrage of racism and oppression and so much of the issues that have struggled with over the generations, the best some could do was just survive. And the trauma that they carried, some of it passed on to the next generation. And so we have some of that. And so part of the, if you will, the goal of these dialogues, of these sharings, is how is it that we can reground ourselves in those teachings, in those sacred teachings that are not any different than for our great-great-great-grandparents. But how do we do it today in this society that presents certain challenges and certain teachings and certain opportunities as well? So I wanted to explore that today with us. And in my traditional culture, there's a term that is called Encloque, and that term Encloque is Nahuatl term that means interconnected sacredness. And the philosophy of many indigenous peoples all around the world is that we are interconnected with all our relations. Some people will call it spirit, some people will call it energy, some people call it vibration, but that we are interconnected. And we're seeing that right now. We're seeing that right now is how we're connected to the whole universe with the COVID-19 that's going on and is affecting people all around the planet. But we're also here in California experiencing tremendous fires that's affecting the atmosphere all across the country. And then the storms that are happening on the East Coast are also affecting, people in every region. The connection of the elements, the trees that have been burned, that then drop ashes on our cars. And some of us just dust those ashes out without recognizing that that came from those trees, those pine trees, those oak trees, and that sacredness of the sacrifice of those trees uh, really helped to protect us. And many times the sacrifice of nature really does protect us. But, the lessons come around, and we must pay attention um, to those lessons. So I wanted to begin by just acknowledging that philosophy of our interconnectedness. And in the work that I've done for, over 40 years professionally, and then the work that has been done on me, in my life, because before me, my ancestors were doing work and preparing that journey for me. But then I came into this world and from an infant began learning, began getting healed, began getting taught, began getting blessed up, but also experienced what this society is challenged with. And through that journey have learned that there's some sacred teachings, because as a young child I was very confused by how I saw my parents treated, how I saw in Compton, my African American relatives treated during that first riot, in the '60s. I was blown away by the fear of seeing National Guard on the corner, and the real them looking at us like we were the enemy, even though we lived in those neighborhoods. And so as a child growing up, wondering, what is this all about, And I know that lately, I've counseled a lot of people and been in a lot of healing circles where people are wondering, what is this all about? What is the meaning of all of this? What is the teaching with all of this? And how do I ground myself? Because in my conversations with those of us that are out in the communities doing the work, that are helping others, that are advocating, that are teachers, that are therapists, that are health professionals, mental health professionals, we recognize that this is a very critical time. And even a lot of us that are doing the work are being impacted with higher rates of feeling depressed, of anxiety, of some sense of hopelessness. And we know that then filters out to many families that don't have resources, that are struggling further with issues of domestic violence, with issues of increased alcohol and drug use, and even violence in communities. So we're in a very critical time. And so I wanted to spend this time today just to remind us of some very sacred teachings. And my work has been really a journey of trying to explore and figure out, what does it mean when we say healing? What does it mean when we say we want to achieve wellness, to have health, to really be able to create balance in our lives? And many of us are wondering that now. What is health right now? What is well-being? What is healing? And so my work has been working with families that are struggling to find that place of balance, that place of healing, that place of well-being, that place of joy, if you will. And what I found is that within those individuals, within those families, within those communities, in which these sacred teachings were shared, were lived, were reinforced, that people ended up in a better place to be able to not only live with a sense of well-being, but also be able to navigate when things challenge them that way. In many communities where I worked that are considered, impoverished and oppressed, there were many families that struggled with all of the different risk factors, if you will. But it always seemed that there was one family on that block that was able to make it, one family that was able to get by, one family where the grandma somehow was able to integrate in the children that she raised, or that single mom, or that the parent or extended family that lived, that were able to indoctrinate in these kids values and a sense of spirituality and a sense of hope, if you will, that helped them to navigate. And in this society, often we struggle with those other families that don't do well. And in fact, we do research on them, but we rarely go and sit with that grandma, And I was blessed, as I've shared in previous podcasts, to have grandmas. I had my own little grandma, that lived with us, and I've shared before that she used to bless us every day. Before she blessed us, she did her prayers. She would connect with that ancestral medicine, with that spirit, and ground herself. And that alone is a teaching that maybe that needs to be one of our practices, that especially now, that before we get up and start to do things or try to figure out things or get on those Zoom calls or support our children or do whatever we need to do, maybe we need to first ground ourselves. And maybe we need to stop and connect with that sacred source. Maybe that's something that we need to do, because I saw my grandma do it, and I saw Tyrone's grandma do it down the street when I'd go pick him up from school. Miss Mosley would be sitting on that porch in her rocking chair in prayer, right? And she stayed in prayer a lot, But those grandmas taught me a lot. And as I've shared before, that grandma, after she would pray, she would come to the room where we were sleeping and she'd bless us up, right? And when I'd go pick up Tyrone from school, his grandma would bless us up too. She said, "Bless you, child. Bless you, baby." And so those blessings that are necessary, that are important, are something that I want to talk about, because what I've found in doing this work for over 40 years and working with families and sitting with that one family. And so my journey, if you will, my research was really sitting with those elders, with those grandmas, sitting with those families that in spite of all the struggle, were able to raise children in a good way, and were able, even though there were struggles and challenges, they were able to make it and maintain the sacredness of their spirit. And so my journey has been researching these families and then looking at the stories and the histories of people from all across the world to see what are these common teachings that are significant to living in a sacred way, to getting through and not losing the sacredness of who you are, in spite of the world not treating you in a sacred way. We call that racism. We call that oppression. We call that discrimination. So what are those teachings? And what I've found is that there's 4 sacred teachings. And us at the National Compadres Network, we share this ideology with people because we feel that if you don't have the rootedness of the teachings, and the rootedness is like the roots of a tree. The roots of a tree are well grounded, and well formulated and interconnected with Encloque Nahuaque, with the sacredness of all our relations, or with the earth and with the water and with grandfather sun and grandmother moon, and that wind will not blow it over. That wind will blend with the growing, and even though sometimes it'll be strong, the roots will hold it there. And so as I done this research and worked with families and observed and learned from these communities across the nation, there come 4 sacred teachings. And the first teaching is the one that I've alluded to already with my grandma. And that first teaching is that teaching of you being a blessing, of you being wanted, of you being essential to this world. And what I mean by that is that there's no mistakes, that it doesn't matter how you came into this world. Doesn't matter if you came into this world by way of 2 parents that were loving and planned for you and even, thought about you and were really happy that you came into this world and prepared and lovingly brought you in and everything. Or if you came from a family that, like mine, I was, my brother's about 8 years older than me. And then all of a sudden, oops, here I come. I joke and say I was a oops baby, right? That all of a sudden I just showed up. And I'm not sure if my parents planned for me or even welcomed me or wanted me, but here I come. And some of you have come in different circumstances. And I've worked with families in which, the child was born out of a violation, out of a rape. But regardless of how you came into this world, regardless of that, how that journey brought you, what the sacred people, what the wisdom keepers, what the medicine people all share is when a child comes and takes that first breath into this world, they are sacred just the way they are. And my grandma reinforced that by her blessing us every day. Que Dios te bendiga, mijo. She would bless us every day. And I didn't understand. I didn't like it. I didn't know why she needed to do that. To me, how was that going to help in terms of my success and my well-being and my growth? As a naive child, I didn't understand the significance of the spirit of when that she blessed me, she conveyed to me, she gave to me, she energetically shared with me her spirit and her loving prayers. And with that, she shared with me her mother's prayers and her father's prayers and the ancestors' prayers, and they came to me. And that was like an inoculation around me. First of all, to ground me in the sense that I'm a blessing, but also to remind me that I am wanted and connected. And one of the things that we're finding today is that people are having difficulty because they're not being able to connect. They're not being able to connect with relatives or friends, and many children are struggling because they can't connect with their friends. My little granddaughter Naya, and I mentioned this I think before in another podcast, that it was going to be her birthday, and she asked her mama if COVID was going to be over by her birthday because she wanted to hug her cousins and wanted to hug her aunts and uncles, and see even little children recognize the significance of interconnection, and that when we connect with each other in a good way, in an acknowledging way, in a loving way, that blessings happen, but healing also happens. And that when we connect that way, when someone blesses us with an acknowledgement, with an embrace, with a loving gesture, that somatically something goes on our body. There's a fluid that's released. And that fluid then filters through our body and connects our head to our heart. And that brings a sense of compassion, but our metabolism begins to flow. And when we begin to flow like that, then we're connected to our heart and to our spirit. And so just that aspect of us acknowledging each other, of recognizing each other's value, of realizing that everyone in this universe is a blessing. Well, we struggle with that today because we are struggling with that other pandemic, the pandemic of racism. And racism is really the antithesis of that sense of everyone is a blessing. It's really saying, no, not everyone is a blessing, and some people are valued more than others. And in fact, there's rhetoric and there's things that are being spewed all over TV and all over the internet that degrade people and make them out to be something that is horrible and denounces their humanity. So it reinforces why the grandmas needed to bless us up and remind us that we were a blessing. Miss Mosley said, you're a child of God, right? And even though we didn't pray in the same way Miss Mosley prayed, the message was still very clear that we come from a sacred place. So I want to just take a moment right here to all of you that are listening. I was really blessed to have grandma that literally blessed me up, that literally gave me that blessing, literally shared her energy, that I could hear the reverberation of her prayers, of her chanting, that she was committed to every day to connecting with that larger spiritual sense that is larger than any problem, larger than any issue. And she then shared that with me. And I believe my grandma's and my ancestors' spirit is still within me, helping me. So I want to take a moment right here for all of you that are listening. If you had a grandma that did that for you, I want you to bring her spirit to you right now. I want you to call her name. And sometimes the grandpas do it too. Call his name and bring his spirit to you and ask him to join you and be with you and continue to bless you up. And I would say maybe every morning you should commit to inviting them to walk with you, inviting them to journey with you. But if you didn't know your grandma, didn't know your grandpa, or if your grandma or grandpa were wounded, if they were carrying so much pain that the only thing that they could do was survive, and out of that survival, maybe you saw their woundedness, you didn't see their sacredness. And in fact, in some families, we see that relatives will wound one another. And I'm not justifying that at all. But I want you to know, even those grandparents, even those parents that didn't arrive at the place where they could bless us up and love us up, even they are sacred. And so I want to call to those grandparents' sacred part, the grandparents' sacredness. Feel the energy of your grandparents and hear in them saying to you that you are sacred and you are a blessing just the way you are. Now, what I've been taught is once we receive that, we must share that. And I think that we need to, first of all, every morning remind ourselves of that. Because in this time, sometimes we don't feel very sacred. And sometimes we don't feel very good. And this world and the universe and media and all of that can, instead of feeling sacred, we can feel scared. So we must move from scared to sacred. And it really is just switching two letters around, right? It's that acknowledgement of our sacredness, and it's then the commitment to live in a sacred way. So if you take scared, it's SCARED, and you take that commitment and you take that acknowledgement and you switch them around and it becomes sacred. It's just a little movement to be in your sacred way. So with that, I want to invite you to acknowledge yourself that way and live those teachings, but then to share them with your relatives and to share them with your children and your grandchildren, if you will. The larger challenge is, how do we see the sacredness in even those people that are different than us, that disagree with us, and sometimes pose a challenge to a world that honors everyone. But we must approach life with love. If we approach it with hate, hate does not heal. Love will heal. And so that first teaching of honoring and recognizing that you are sacred and you're a blessing and that this universe and this world needs you is where we begin. But then that second teaching, and that's why my grandma would say it was, vete a la escuela, mijo, go to school, learn, But I also recognize that when I went to school, I was also teaching. And so my mom would say, pórtase bien, behave. And when my mom said behave, it didn't mean just behave. It meant that everything you do at school is going to teach those people who we are and what we're about. They're going to think of us based on how you behave. And what my grandmother and your grandmother and all our ancestors wanted is for all of their grandchildren and those people, for the next generations, to fulfill their sacred purpose. So the second teaching that I want to reflect to you is that all of us have a sacred purpose. All of us come into this universe for a sacred reason, to walk in a sacred way, but to contribute to the world in a sacred way. And some of us, are helpers. Some of us are healers. Some of us are workers. but we're all sharing what is that sacred purpose in you. And so I want you to take a moment to think about, how you are fulfilling your sacred purpose. How do we know? Well, the sacred purpose will call to you. It calls to you. It reverberates with you when you are fulfilling your purpose. There's a sense of connectedness. There's a sense of joy. There's a sense of motivation that comes through you. And maybe some of you right now are not able to fulfill that sacred purpose, but I want you to really recognize that if you go in that direction, if you water that direction, if you pray for that direction, the avenues and the teachers will show up. The blessings will show up that way, that all of us have a sacred purpose. And if we think about it, I work with young people and I share with them a story about the animal kingdom. And, in this story, the coyote didn't want to be a coyote anymore because nobody really lifted up the coyote as something special. The coyote had a skinny tail and a skinny nose and scrawny coat that nobody really liked. And the coyote didn't want to be a coyote anymore. And he wanted to be an eagle because the eagle flies higher, a bear because the bear is so ferocious, or he wanted to be a lion. The lion was ferocious and the bear, would sleep in the cave. And he didn't want to be a coyote. And the story goes in which the coyote gets up to, because it was a naming day, and he comes to the naming day, but he's late because he fell asleep. He was in a dream. And many of us get caught in those dreams that we think our dreams are just going to manifest. But we have to recognize that the dreams will not manifest unless we wake up. Unless we wake up and acknowledge our sacredness and wake up and walk with our sacred purpose. And recognize that within each of us, we have a sacred purpose that is waiting to be fulfilled. Well, the coyote overslept because he was overthinking and because he was filled with fear and wasn't sure if he was good enough and wasn't sure if he could do it. All these doubts that for many of us, we've been fed those doubts, that we're not smart enough, we're not good enough, that can never happen. And those doubts really are part of, if you will, that oppression. That for generations, some of us have heard those negative things, that we can't be that, and we can't become certain things, and we can't fulfill those things. And if we do, we feel guilty, and we don't feel smart enough. And even some of us that are professionals today still feel like we're faking it, right? But don't recognize the real sacred wisdom that we carry for our ancestors. So the coyote gets there to pick his name. And he wants to be the eagle, but the eagle is already taken. And he wants to be that bear, and the bear is already taken. And he wants to be the lion's already taken. And so he asks, so what's left? And they tell him, well, the only name that's left is coyote. You are who you are. And he gets very upset because he doesn't like who he is. And this society has made us judge ourselves, made us judge how we look, made us judge how we act, made us judge our feelings, our perceptions, our ways of being, and has made us judge each other. And that's why in many communities there is not this connectedness, but there's this hierarchy of value. And the society has placed this hierarchy of value in terms of, in its systems, in its educational systems, in its hierarchy of who they pay more. And that's why women are paid much less, because in this, patriarchal society, we value women less, even though they're the center of our universe. And they're the first ones that give us life, the first sacrificers. And really, in this time, it said that women really are the ones that will lead us to our healing and really should be leading us right now. But the coyote didn't know any of those lessons. He didn't know any of that. He just wanted to be what society said he should be and not who he really was. And finally, they tell him, I'm sorry, you are who you are, right? And that sense of recognizing that you are enough, that you are who you are, and that when we look in the mirror that we can appreciate ourselves and love ourselves and recognize that we have been sent here and we are a reflection of our ancestors. But with that, we then have a sacred work to do. And the coyote asks, well, what do I do? I'm just a coyote. I don't fly high like the eagle. I can't see. I'm not, ferocious lion, or I'm not a big bear. What am I supposed to do? And just then, grandfather's son came out and says, I'm going to give you my light. And he made the coyote, the color of his coat, multidimensional, so that it had many colors in it, of many, if you will, races or dimensions. He says, you will travel between the people. You can go different places at night and in the day. He says, okay, but how about the skinny tail? Oh, and grandfather says that tail is to remind you of your ancestral teachings. Well, but how about this skinny nose? The skinny nose is to let you go. You could be anything you want to be. You can go forward. He says, but what is my job? What is my purpose in life? And just then, Grandmother Moon came out. And with a radiant glow, she went, shh. And with that, she says, I now gave you a song. Says, you have a song to sing, Coyote. I want you to go up on that hill every night. And I want you to howl. And I want you to howl with joy and howl with dignity and howl with pride and howl with respect and with love. I want you to howl to remind everyone in this universe that everyone has a sacred purpose, that no one is set here to do harm, and no one is a mistake. Creator doesn't make mistakes. You are sent by your ancestors here. So walk on to do your sacred purpose. All of us have a song to sing. All of us come from a story. And all of us have a sacred purpose in this universe. And it's important to know that right now in this time of sheltering in place, that one of the important steps in visioning and fulfilling our sacred purpose is sometimes we have to stop and reflect. We have to stop and evaluate. We sometimes just need to stop because often we're just doing. We're so busy doing so many things that we don't really get to do what fulfills our spirit. And I know some of you now have some time to create music or to cook more, and that's your sacred love, or to create more things, to do art, or to create relationships that you've never had time to do, to create traditions in your home, to reestablish and recreate the love in your relationship in your home. So this is a very significant time for you to embrace your sacred purpose of creation, your sacred purpose of you fulfilling the vision that your ancestors had for you. And so that second teaching is, on top of you being a blessing and being sacred, that all of us have a sacred purpose. Now is a time that if you need to shift, if you want to move on to what that sacred purpose is, because sometimes we get in this hamster wheel of just doing whatever we're doing, and it doesn't bring us happiness. It doesn't bring us joy. And the reason why we don't pursue that which we really feel we need to do is because we're afraid. And we come back to that first teaching. We don't feel we're a blessing. We don't feel we're good enough. We don't feel we'll be wanted. We don't feel we'll be accepted. So we must always come back to that first teaching and recognize that you are a blessing, that you are sacred, that you do have the knowledge and the wisdom and the ability within you to fulfill your sacred purpose. And then the responsibility is then walking in that direction, not by yourself, but call them grandmas, call them grandpas. Reach out to your relatives, to those people. And I've been in a place sometimes where I'm stuck and don't know. And when I say my prayers, I say, send me somebody that can help me. Send me a teacher. And let me just say that sometimes those teachers that come don't come in the frame that you want them to come. You're looking for some, a magnificent person, and it may be somebody on the street. It may be a homeless person that's going to give you a teaching. It may be one of the people that you're working with, that you're supposed to be helping, that's going to teach you. It may be your child, and it may be the child in your life that is the most difficult one, that you have to figure out, how do you love that child in spite of? How do you accept that child in spite of? And that child becomes your teacher. So we never know where the teachers are going to come from, but we need to recognize that sacred purpose that all of us have is part of this journey. And that brings me then to the third sacred teaching. And that third sacred teaching is that all of us have wisdom and medicine that comes from our culture, from our ancestors, and from our history. And that's why, in many of our cultures, we sang and we danced and we prayed and we created and we shared food with each other. Within all of those things is the energy that helps us to maintain, to get by. That prayer that my grandmother shared, I still remember that. The candle that she would light, I would smell that. When we would be sick, she would go in the garden and make these teas that were yucky to me, but they made us better. And then we would sing, and in growing up, there's many cultures. We sit with sometimes with Baba Greg and the Brotherhood of Elders, and they share with us the sacred drums that come from their culture, and they chant and sing those sacred songs. And so sometimes you need other people from other cultures to share their medicine with you. And that doesn't mean you take that medicine, but it means that sometimes you need the vibration of others to remind you of maybe you need to now look into your own culture. And in my culture, we have those drums. We have the huehuet, that drum that you play, that you see the Aztecas play in that drum. And we have songs and chants and in our native ways, there are ceremonies that go on. And there are ceremonies that go on to remind us of our sacredness, but to bring us back in alignment. Because see, what trauma and what racism and oppression does is it shakes us up sometimes and it stops us. Trauma is the interruption of our interconnectedness with all our relations. As an example, when we get upset with somebody, we don't want to talk to them, or we're talking with them in a way that is not sacred. And sometimes words come out of our mouth that we don't want to say. And that's what we call trauma or woundedness. But the sacredness then becomes where we remember about our sacred teachings and remember that the people in our lives are also sacred. And we remember our sacred purpose is to learn and to teach. And then we have to practice our sacred culture. Those traditions. What are your traditions? In my house, was always an altar. There was a centering place in my home always. And even though we lived in a crowded house, not, I guess you would call it poor, there was that sacred place that my grandma had her candles and her sacred things. And we knew we could always go there. So I ask you, where is your sacred place that you can go? And especially in these times, this is the time in which you need to go to that sacred place every day. And sometimes even more than every day when you need it. I work with couples sometimes and I ask them, where is that sacred place in your home? Because it's natural that couples are not going to get along. And sometimes they're going to fight and sometimes they're going to be angry with each other. So where is the place where you go to reunite your sacredness? And what I offer to couples sometimes is, yes, communication is important. And sometimes it's important to discuss things out, but sometimes the woundedness is so big that words only get in the way. So if you have that sacred place, sometimes you need to kneel in front of that sacred place, join hands, and ask the ancestor and creator to help you. And with a simple prayer, a simple ask, saying, Creator, ancestors, we love each other. We're having difficulty right now, help us. And in that prayer, in that talk, you can remind each other of why you came together, why you met, of the love that you have. And then you can ask for help. Help us. Help us with our wounds so that we don't wound each other. And for some of us, that tradition is something that we've learned, but some of us have to recreate that because as part of this historical trauma and part of that historical racism, many of our traditions and our ceremonies and our sacred ways were taken away from us. So it's time to recreate those sacred ways. And part of that sacred way was to connect with an elder, connect with a medicine person, connect with a wisdom keeper in your life that you can go to for counsel, that you can go to and sit with. And the other thing that we were part of that was significant was that we're always part of a larger collective. And that larger collective could be 3 or 4 people. But we've learned that sometimes when I sit in circle with people, they don't have the words and they're not ready to share. But if you sit with others that are sharing and are praying or singing or drumming, that medicine could get into you and get you to a place where through somebody else's words, through somebody else's reflections, it allows you to heal. And it gives you an example of how healing needs to take place. So we recognize that within all of our cultures, there's medicine there. There's songs, there's rhythms, is the heartbeat of our ancestors' sacredness and medicine. How do you incorporate that in your life daily? And if you don't know, ask. If you don't know where to go, ask. And the teacher will show up. But then it's your responsibility to create and cultivate that for you and then pass it on. So now, that blessing that my grandma gave to me, I give to my children, my grandchildren. I give it to everybody. Anyone that I can see, I'm going to bless up, right? That's part of our tradition. In some of our traditions, we offered food. And I remember when we would go visit people, we'd take a plate of food as an offering. That's part of sacred tradition that you offer. You're generous. You share. Unfortunately, we live in a society that's based on fear, so we're afraid to share. We don't want to give. We hoard things. We keep things to ourselves. There's enough abundance in this world to feed everyone. There's enough prayers in this world to really embrace everyone. There's enough medicine that all of us have right now to heal this world. And within our bodies, we have the ability to heal ourselves. So let us rely on our traditions, on our culture. And some of you that say, well, I don't know my culture, will go on the journey to find it. Some of you say, well, I come from 3 cultures. I don't know, I'm 30% this and 40. No, let me stop you right there. You're 100% of that one grandma, 100% of that other grandma. And if you have 4 cultures, you're 100% of all of them. This society makes it difficult because they want us to check a box. We don't live in boxes. We live in communities. We live in the spiritual way. Embrace all of your cultures, all of those ways, and acknowledge yourself, acknowledge the ancestors, know the traditions that you carry, and those that you want to learn, go to a teacher, go to an elder, and walk with them. It's not something you can learn on the internet. It's not something you can read about. You have to commit to live it. And it's not knowing the teachings, it's living the teachings. And then finally, the 4th sacred teaching that I want to share with you is we must all spend time to heal, to grow, to learn, and to give back. It's important. And just like anything, the trees shed, they release their leaves, that it's important that we shed and that we release and let go of the wounds, that we let go of the woundedness, that we release those habits. And some of us throughout our journey, because of our wounds, picked up some habits, picked up some ways that maybe helped us through that moment. Maybe that alcohol, maybe that blunt, maybe that medication, maybe you being angry. You needed to be angry during that time because you didn't feel safe and you needed to protect yourself. But in order to heal, you need to know when to put those down, when to cleanse, when to let that go. And all of us need to go on the journey to be able to cleanse and to let go and to forgive and to ask for forgiveness, and in the end, forgive ourselves, but then commit to the journey of ongoing healing. Grandfather's son every day comes up and then goes inside and touches grandmother moon, and every day grandfather's son cleanses that way. We need to recognize that healing and cleansing and rejuvenation is an ongoing process. And we can do that in conjunction with the natural elements. So I invite you to, every morning when you wake up, to say good morning to the sacredness of who you are. Begin with that prayer, but then go out there and greet grandfather's son. The light of grandfather's son will remind you that the light is waiting, that lighted path, and not that darkened path, not the path of your own wounds, of your own fears. So you must feed your faith, not your fears. Go greet grandfather's son. It's good for your body too. The vitamin D will help your metabolism. Then touch Mother Earth. Mother Earth is sacred. It vibrates at the same vibration when our bodies are well. Touch the earth. Put your toes on that grass. Put your hands in that dirt. Cultivate, grow your own vegetables. Eat from that organic, that natural way, and it will heal your body. But connect with the earth as much as you can. I was a little kid, and we would lay out on the grass, eat blades of grass, and look up. And that was such healing. I didn't understand the significance of that. But you can do that, and that's very powerful. Then recognize the sacred feminine of the water. And that not only must we drink water, it's important for us to drink water and to hydrate. That helps cleanse things and keeps things flowing. But if you have the opportunity, jump in that river, jump in that ocean, take a bath, or at least take a intentionally cleansing shower. And you can put wonderful herbs in that bath if you want, some lavender, some rosemary. You can use those herbs from the earth, and when the earth and the feminine of the earth and the feminine of the water come together, it's a powerful cleansing, because feminine, the women, know how to cleanse us. It's the feminine that allows us to cry. So I invite you to cry when you need to cry. That water will cleanse you that way. And so that water is very significant. Then the sacred wind, right? And we must breathe. When we breathe in and breathe out, we take in what is good for us, take in that sacredness, and we breathe out. Let go. But you can only let go if you're willing to release. Let go of the fear. Let go of the anger. Let go of the resentment. Let go of trying to be in control. Let go of trying to figure everything out. Sometimes it's important just to let go and release. And so we must breathe and take breaths and take time to breathe. And especially when you're tense and especially when you're worried, just breathe into your sacredness. Breathe in to the moment. Breathe in to the way in which you want to heal. Breathe in with your sacred traditions and incorporate them so your breath becomes that of a sacred fire that releases and lets go. And then finally, that fifth sacred element of Nana Luna, Grandmother Moon, right? It's important that we allow the moon to heal us. And what that means is, as we get ready to rest at night, we need to release everything. Put your cell phone someplace else. Don't watch the news before you go to sleep. Don't be looking at your emails and Facebook or Instagram. Let all that go. And anything you're worried about for the next day, I suggest get a tablet and write down all those things you're worried about, things you got to do, and then put it aside. And then allow your body. You must give your body permission to rest. Give your body permission to be at peace. Give your body permission to just be. Give thanks for the day. Ask for the guidance and allow yourself to dream. And some dreams you'll remember and some you won't. But it's important to allow yourself to rest and allow Grandmother Moon to do her job. And with that, then it creates a tradition. It creates a process for us to heal and to recover our sacredness and recover our journey. And I suggest that you reach out to those people that can support you. We all need people that can support us. Don't hold in stuff. It will ferment. It will make you sick. If you need help, reach out to someone. And some of us can reach out to relatives, some of us can reach out to friends, but there becomes a time in which some of us need to reach out to professional help. There are hotlines that you can reach out to if you're feeling like you need some further help in terms of balancing your mental well-being. If you're sick, don't deny it. And now you can do telemedicine, where you can do it over the phone and get counsel. Because one of the things that happens is when we're not feeling well, our mind will take us away and think that it's the most horrible thing and it may just be gas. But reach out. We are meant to be interconnected. And when you reach out to someone, it also blesses them. It fulfills their sacred purpose that way, But finally, reach out to those people that need someone to reach out to them, that tend to hold things inside. Just check in on them. Just tell them you love them. Just call in to see how you're doing, right? And without judgment, and you don't even have to give any advice. Sometimes it's just that connection, right? And so this segment today was really about you. Really about you regrounding yourself in those 4 teachings, that you're a blessing and sacred just the way you are, that you have a sacred purpose, and invite you to go on that journey to fulfill that sacred purpose. The third one is that all of us have cultural and ancestral traditions that we need to cultivate, that we need to grow, that we need to develop and incorporate as an integral part of our lives. And then finally, the last one is healing. We need to heal. We need to support each other. We need to reach out. We need help. But we also need to create communities of health and healing. With that, I want to thank you all and thank you for listening and journeying with me today. And we invite you to offer any comments, any reviews, share the podcast with other people, and continue listening. We're going to continue inviting other wisdom keepers. And even if you have some people you think might be good, that you've heard, that you think might be good to share, submit their name to us and we'll see if we can invite them. But in the end, I want you to remind you what a blessing and what a privilege it is that you journeyed with us today. Mother Teresa says, we all need to contribute to peace, and we need to take our peace and contribute to that peace. All of us have a piece to contribute. This begins with honoring the sacredness of the universe, honoring your ancestors, honoring yourself, and honoring all your relations. Thank you very much. Classical.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.